Frontiers and Pioneers, in association with Sempra LNG.
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned earlier, developing a large-scale project is like running a marathon or even, doing a decathlon. They take a long time, a lot of energy to develop, so you cannot really sprint the whole way. You will break, so you need to really pace yourself and pace your teams as well.
Hello and welcome to LNG TV and our latest episode of Frontiers and Pioneers. We are honoured today to welcome William Gurrola to LNG TV.
William is Director LNG Marketing and Commercial Development for Sempra LNG, responsible for advancing Sempra LNG's natural gas liquefaction projects. William led the development of the pioneering ECA LNG project in Mexico, the only large-scale liquefaction project to take FID in 2020. Welcome, William. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, William, I'll kick off with that successful FID. Can you give us a brief overview of the project and some of the challenges that you had to overcome?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Aly. Hello, Will. Hello, Aly. Thank you for that introduction. I'm very excited to be here with you today. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I first want to congratulate you for the LNG TV platform. I think it's a brilliant idea, and I look forward to many more episodes in the future. So thank you for having me. Yes, Aly, to answer your question, to understand this project, we first must go back in time a bit. Back in 2004, Sempra developed what was at the time the first regas facility in the west coast of North America, Energía Costa Azul, or ECA as we call it. This facility has been operating since 2008. And it is located in the west coast of Mexico in the state of Baja California. It's really just 55 miles south of the U.S.-Mexico border of San Diego and Tijuana, north of the port of Ensenada. It's still operating today and providing service to its customers. But back then, given the changing LNG market conditions in the early 2010s and the shale revolution in the U.S., similar to other regas facilities in the West Coast, like, Sabine, Freeport, and our own project, Cameron, it made a lot of sense for Sempra LNG and Yenova is our Mexican company, to join forces and develop a project that would add export capabilities to the existing regas facility. So we started looking at this since, around 2014, 2015, and basically 5 years later, like you said, Sempra and Yenova took a positive FID in November 2020, and after receiving all of our permits, signing an EPC contract with Technip, securing the needed pipeline capacity for feed gas, and then signing 20-year sale purchase agreements with Total and Mitsui for the bulk of the export capacity. So, obviously FID was a great achievement, and the resulting project was, a first phase, and I'll explain that in a second, that will add one LNG train, basically to produce 3 million tons a year, and will make use of some of the existing facilities like the storage tank, the jetty, the berth, etc. The owners and sponsors of this project are Sempra LNG, Yenova, and now Total, who has come in as a minority equity partner. We expect to start delivering LNG in the market in 2024, early 2025. Our journey to FID, like most projects, was full of ups and downs, with no shortage of challenges. But always, from the beginning, we knew about the solid value proposition of this project. It was very clear. We had a brownfield site with good access to competitive and abundant gas from the U.S. Basins, Permian mainly, and a privileged location in the Pacific Coast, basically with direct access to the biggest LNG market in the world of Asia. So, we had existing facilities that would allow us to be cost competitive, the proximity to large natural gas reserves, and a location that basically gives you 50% cost shipping savings versus the U.S. Gulf Coast, and you avoid all the Panama Canal traffic issues to Asia. And, the last point, it gives a diversified LNG supply to buyers still looking for U.S. hub-priced LNG. So the value elements were always there, but, also from the very beginning, we had an avalanche of challenges. Mostly around the concept, would this concept work? And what I mean by that is, this project has a unique situation of being a binational project, where natural gas from one country is exported via pipeline and to another country where it will get liquefied and then re-exported to the global market. So from the beginning, there were concerns and questions of how would that even work from a regulatory perspective, for example. Since feed gas is U.S. gas, would the Department of Energy in the U.S. review and issue a long-term export license? Would they require a FERC environmental review of the project like they do in other projects in the U.S., even though FERC has no jurisdiction in Mexico? And in Mexico, frankly, regulation around liquefaction did not really exist, and export permits were just for short-term periods. So, needless to say, we had a lot of work to do in front of us, and we had dozens of meetings with regulators on the U.S. side, on the Mexican side, to determine a clear roadmap to permit our project. So I would say the biggest challenge for sure was to prove the concept of a binational project could work. And we did, we proved it. And then just the last thing I would say, we started developing this project as a large project, a 12 million ton project, and then we quickly pivoted to a phased approach. Being phase one, the one we took FID last year, which is a 3 million ton project, and then phase two with an additional 12 million tons down the road. And that was mainly to address what we were hearing from our customers. How can we get to market faster? And then test the concept with a more manageable size project. And the market response was really, really strong. And, as they say, the rest is history.
Well, firstly, kind of many congratulations to you, William, obviously with your involvement in the project, Sempra LNG and your partners. It's never easy being first. So kind of regarding Mexico, do you see there being further opportunity for other projects to be developed in the country? I know there are some at an earlier stage, but also what is so special about Mexico?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. When you look at all the liquefaction projects in the U.S. Gulf Coast and all the LNG supply coming out of there, a big bulk of that is still targeted to the Asian market, which it's not only the biggest market, but it's the market that's underpinning the growth of the demand in LNG for the next 20 years. So the U.S. Gulf Coast is one way to get cost-competitive U.S. gas into that market. It has been a great success story, like Cameron, our project, and others have really disrupted the market and become an LNG hub. But, another way to get U.S. gas to reach that market, the Asian market, and frankly, probably one that makes a lot more sense, especially for West Texas gas out of the Permian, is through the Pacific, and Mexico obviously is optimally located in that regard, especially as I said, with Permian, it's relatively close to the Pacific. And then you add the fact that marine shipping distances to Asia are roughly half versus the U.S. Gulf. Well, obviously there's a clear advantage. So it puts Mexico in a great spot to lead the development of an LNG supply from North America. And, ECA is a clear example that that concept works. But not only that, I think, we also prove that we're one of the most cost competitive supply sources for the Asian market. So you have to infer, obviously, from that other projects will come at the Pacific coast in Mexico. And I think the Mexican government will continue to be supportive of these projects under the right conditions. Look, these are big capital projects. They bring a lot of direct foreign investments, jobs, positive social impacts. There's infrastructure build out in the country that also helps the local market. It puts Mexico in, gives a spot in the energy-driven geopolitical arena, and it also will solve Mexico's problem of pipeline overbuild, at least in the short term. So to answer your questions, whether more FIDs will come will depend on each project specifics and whether they present a positive case for Mexico. But there is one big caveat that I want to say here. Project developers looking at Pacific Coast to develop projects will only be successful if they know how to navigate the local landscape and truly understand the regulatory regime in Mexico. And I think that's where we have a clear advantage over others. Sempra through Yenova has been developing energy infrastructure for over 20 years. Yenova is a Mexican company, and our long-term presence there was a key success factor for ECA. So sure, like you said, we're going to pave the way for others potentially, but there's no substitution for being local and part of the communities there.
William, looking beyond Mexico to sort of Central and South America, how much regional growth do you see over the coming 5-10 years? I think specifically when we kind of consider larger markets such as Brazil, the evolution of LNG to power businesses and downstream LNG markets such as LNG bunkering, which are the sort of frontier markets and how much growth do you see?
Sure. Yeah. No. Latin America is a very interesting market for sure, but one that is also extremely complex in terms of the energy equation. Demand for LNG is relatively small overall in the region, when compared to other markets. And LNG basically competes with, domestic supplies in some countries, and in most of and in others, other countries, most of the power generation is based on hydro, like Brazil, Colombia, or competitive renewable energy like in Chile. In absolute terms, I think Panama, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Brazil, they are the only countries expected to increase LNG demand by more than 1 million tons a year. But there are a lot of people looking at these markets, and a common thread, I think, between these countries is that growth will come, as you say, from LNG to power. Obviously, bunkering, huge, will come. And then other small-scale applications. I see as frontier markets in that region, obviously Brazil, the biggest market there, and mainly driven by their large IPP growth to balance their system, which is dominated by hydro. Colombia is another one that I think will be coming in the next 5 to 10 years, mainly driven by their domestic gas production deficits. And then, there's other smaller markets, like I mentioned, with very targeted LNG to power projects. Whether these materialize, I think will depend on the regulatory environment, the market conditions of each project, and then, the support of the government, which is, huge in these types of projects.
You played a key leadership role in successfully taking this project from end to end right through to FID. You mentioned earlier navigating local landscape as being one element, but what are some of the other key pillars of successful project development do you see?
Yeah, no, I think, I would put at the top of the list for sure, a well-defined stage gate process, that takes you from the conceptual idea of the project to your final execution. I think that is key. Projects like ECA are these very long, drawn-out processes, and they're almost like running a marathon. So a disciplined approach, that clearly defines project goals and the deliverables in each stage is very, very important. The stage gate process also gives you transparency. These big capital projects typically involve large amounts of people in the project team, and these are, multidisciplinary teams that all need to be very well coordinated, like an orchestra. So part of this stage gate process, is having well-defined roles and responsibility. And another thing that's very, very important is governance, between the project team and your management. That's always very important. But these processes, they have to be flexible enough to be able to maneuver quickly when circumstances change and you can pivot to new directions. You will always run into a wall. No matter what you do, you will always run into a wall. But you need to know how to back up and then, keep going forward quickly, nimbly. And in my experience, there always has to be a sense of entrepreneurship across a project team to allow thinking outside the box. Project development is never a straight line. It's almost like a labyrinth. So you need, a lot of creativity and you need to have your off ramps to get through that. On the softer side, I think, but equally important, I think, is team building. I think that's probably the key pillar in my opinion. At the end of the day, the project team is the engine that will drive you to success or to failure. I think the biggest contributor, at least in the project that I led, was the outstanding team that we had across, both Sempra LNG in the U.S. and Yenova in Mexico. We were one project team, very good sense of camaraderie, a purpose. We had long working days, working weekends, but you could always see that team spirit, the excitement, and motivation to accomplish something that was, unique and challenging. Another pillar, I think, is resilience. When you're in project development, if you don't have resilience, you're probably not going to do well. There's many ups and downs during the life of the development of the project, and a lot of what we call whiplash. From changing directions instantly or unexpectedly. So being resilient and instilling resilience in others, it was key to keep moving forward.
Going back to the Mexico project, I want to come on to some more general questions about leadership, because that project must have been a juggling act for you, managing high caliber cross-functional teams, significant joint venture partners, customers in different time zones, also ensuring that the authorities and regulators across 2 jurisdictions were comfortable. So what was your secret to balancing all of this?
Yeah, Aly, this project was not short of complexities and trying dynamics. Its multi-stakeholder and binational nature made it very unique, obviously. Where a great deal of coordination was required, not only to advance development, but also, to avoid things falling through the cracks. During the 4 or 5 years of development, we went through several organizational changes at Sempra and at Innova. We also went through changes in administration and regulatory frameworks in the US and in Mexico. And obviously the LNG market, it changed significantly from when we started looking at the project until we finished. It was very different. And why not throw in a global pandemic there in the middle? So, managing and leading all of that from the position I had as project director, one of the things that helped me the most was having a solid team behind this project. I had the great fortune to have been surrounded by brilliant people, much smarter than I am. That always helps. Having a team that delivered day in, day out made my life just much more easier. Their dedication to the project inspired me and definitely helped me navigate through the low periods of the project, which, were many. Ultimately, I believe, the only ingredient that is a must in a secret sauce, if there ever was one, is the ingredient of people. Sure, you can have a great product to sell, but as a leader, if you have a good team where everyone pulls their weight, that will differentiate you from the rest. And also one of the key lessons learned for me was establishing good communication channels, across the team, with your customers, partners, obviously, and especially with your management. Lead with open communication. That was very important.
William, we don't all start out as leaders. You grow and develop. And I'm sure there's been lots of people along the way who've supported your own professional development journey. Have you ever had a mentor, and is there sort of one specific piece of advice that stands out?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been fortunate to have several great mentors, I think both at work and personally, that have helped me navigate through my career and through life. One of the things that stands out for me, from a mentor and the advice this person gave me, and it's something that I always try to relate to some of my younger colleagues, is about exposure. We constantly hear in the corporate environment, the need of people to get more exposure, whether it's with customers or different levels of management. We all want to be in the room, right? Get noticed, influence, it makes sense. But I remember one of my mentors some years ago, in the early part of my career, advising me to be aware of exposure because it's not always good. And she made the analogy of getting sun exposure. Being in the sun feels great. It provides, needed vitamin D, and you can even get a nice looking tan. But on the flip side, if not done correctly, it can also burn you. So corporate exposure is the same. It's generally good, but it also can burn you if not done well, if you're not prepared. And sometimes timing is everything. And, I have seen it many times and even experienced it personally. So, I think that was very good advice I got.
You mentioned a bit earlier about working long days and weekends and travel within the LNG business. What about time management? People say that phrase quite often, but how do you manage your time and what are your non-negotiables?
Yeah, I think like I mentioned earlier, developing a large-scale project is like running a marathon or even, doing a decathlon. They take a long time. A lot of energy to develop. So you cannot really sprint the whole way. You will break. So you need to really pace yourself and pace your teams as well. Every project has these peaks and valleys in terms of workload and activities. And what I did, I really learned to take advantage of those valleys, to slow down, regroup mentally, physically, check in with myself, focus on other things in my personal life. So when things started picking up again and you reach those peaks, you are ready to go 100%. And actually be in a better position to manage, the inevitable overload of work that you're going to have. I have also learned that not everything has to be addressed immediately, right? Some issues actually work themselves out without your direct intervention. So I learned to be a lot less reactive, and that definitely, helped me with efficient time management. And in terms of non-negotiables, for me, it's very clear, and it's definitely a family time. Carving out time to be with my loved ones, it's absolutely important to me. And I never stopped doing that.
How do you mentally refresh? Do you have any sort of daily, weekly habits or rituals that you think are important in terms of maintaining a healthy work-life balance?
Obviously physical and mental health are very important generally, and maybe even more so when you're leading big projects that come with a lot of exposure and pressure. For me, working out at least 3, maybe if I'm lucky 4 times a week helps me stay fit, focused. When I really don't do that, I feel sluggish physically and mentally. I love to play tennis more than anything, but I typically, work out in the gym or now at home. Also, especially during when the pandemic started, I started taking these long walks and listening to podcasts, audiobooks. I've really enjoyed that. That's really helped me. I've also taken a bit of an interest in yoga and meditation, still a beginner, but, it definitely helped. But I think ultimately, whatever you do, you have to carve out time for yourself to clear your mind, check in with yourself, plan your schedules, and be with family and friends and try to be more balanced. In this world where we're attached to the screens and video all day, you have to cut yourself some slack, frankly. Pause and try to be present and enjoy the moment in front of you. All this helps, I think, mentally and physically.
You spoke about advice that you had received, excellent advice from a mentor. In terms of you speaking to someone who's looking to follow a career path, or if you were able to give yourself, looking back, one piece of advice, what would that be?
Yeah, well, if I could go back, 20, 25 years, there's probably a huge list of things that I would tell my younger self. But if I have to choose one piece of advice, I think, is always be authentic, with yourself and with others. I believe this is one of the great traits of leaders, authenticity. In all parts of life, you're going to run into people that share your values, ideas, your vision, but others that really don't. And that's okay. If you try to make everyone happy, you will just fail miserably with all of them. So, I would tell myself, be authentic every day and be kind.
I think that's pretty great advice. Again, still in a reflective mode, I believe that we all want to make an impact. If sort of one day you were to be looking back at your career and reflect upon what you've achieved and what you've accomplished over your career, what would be that impact that you would have liked to have made?
Wow, yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that I frankly have thought about it lately, especially after last year with the project. In addition to being able to meet a great professional goal of taking a liquefaction project to FID and the great importance, I think, that this project brings to Sempra and Nova, I found myself asking, why the last 4 years that I spent doing this, what did I really leave behind? At Sempra LNG, our mission is to deliver energy with purpose. And I really, really like that because, we are executing on that vision, projects like ECA that, will provide reliable and cost competitive energy, LNG, to global markets for the next 20 years. And when you think about the energy transition, towards a net zero carbon world by, let's say, 2050, LNG from our projects is going to play a key role as a transition fuel and as a complement to renewables. But more importantly, I think in the short term, a role in displacing coal, fuel oil, diesel in many parts of the world, including our own neighborhood. Baja California, the southern part of the peninsula in Mexico, most of their generation is still run on diesel. So I think that's a legacy that I'm very proud of. Another thing that's important to me when I think of legacy and having an impact is around, I mentioned this, building great teams and building a deep bench of talent within your organization. I think that, individual development and growth lead often to great teamwork, and great teamwork leads to success. And, when people feel they are growing and they're influencing and they're part of the action, they will go above and beyond. So when you accomplish great projects or goals or any goals, and you have fun and build relationships and friendships along the way, that to me is a definition of success. And hopefully it's a legacy that I leave behind as well.
William, a lovely note to end on. Thank you so much. It has been our pleasure. Thank you for joining us here. It's been great to hear all your views, and thank you also for your openness. That is all we've got time for, though, on Frontiers and Pioneers here on LNG TV. For now, it is goodbye from Will and myself.
Frontiers and Pioneers, in association with Sempra LNG.